Crispin, The Cross of Lead by Avi. Chapter 28. For the rest of the day we made our way without the benefit of roads. A few times we came upon narrow paths, and these we followed, but only for short times. Instead, Bear went this way, now that way, following no reason that I could grasp, other than we moved farther and farther from the steward. As we went, he hardly spoke. "Do you know where we're going?" I finally asked. "To where you can remain alive," he replied. It was dusk when he finally allowed us to stop. Rain had begun to fall. The dismal drizzle caused the overhanging leaves to drip with irritating monotony. Before a low and flaring fire, which sputtered in the damp, we ate 2 small pigeons Bear had managed to snare. Perhaps to shift my mind from my worries, he showed me how he did his snaring, using a few long strands of horsetail hair that he kept in his bag. After tying the strands together, he made them into a loop, which enabled him to trap with great cunning the birds without their even knowing there were any danger. I was much engaged. After eating, we stayed on opposite sides of the fire, taking what warmth we could. Bear was in a solemn mood and spoke very little, seemingly preoccupied with his own thoughts. "Do you believe me now?" I said. "About what?" "That they're looking for me." "Yes," he said. I lay back and recalled what had happened in the forest at Stromford. "Bear," I said, getting up, "I remembered something else." "What?" "The man the steward met had a horse, a fine one. He must have been a man of wealth." Bear only shrugged. Then he said, "I wish I knew what the document was that the stranger brought to John Aycliffe. Though even if I had seen it, I couldn't have read it. Oh, no, shucks. That was Crispin. I wished I knew what the document was that the stranger brought to John Aycliffe. Though even if I had seen it, I couldn't have read it." "By and by, I'll teach you," he said. "Bear?" "Yes, lad," he said sleepily. "I've remembered something else. Before I left, the priest told me my mother, she could read and write." "How could a miserable peasant woman acquire such skill?" "I don't know. I never saw her do so. But Father Quinnell insisted it was true." "Did he teach her?" "He didn't say, but he insisted it was she who wrote on my cross." Bear rubbed his face and beard, then rolled down onto his back. "Enough," he said. "We'd best sleep if we intend to survive. We'll need to find a village soon." As usual, before I lay down, I fetched the cross from the pouch from around my neck and placed it between my hands when I, upon my knees, began to pray. "Crispin," I heard Bear cry out. "Crispin." I looked around. "Give me that cross." Remembering what he had said about crosses, and concerned that he might do it some harm, I said, "I'd rather not." "Give it," he roared. "It's precious to me," I said, holding it back. "By God's honest heaven, by God's honest heart," he said, "I won't do any harm to it." "Do you truly vow?" "By the bloody hands of Christ," he said. Though reluctant, I gave him what he wanted. Taking the cross in his great hands, where it seemed even smaller than it was, he peered at it with his shrewd eyes, even feeling it with his fingers. Next, he brought it near to the fire. Knowing that lead could melt in fire, I cried, "Don't cast it away!" Paying me no mind, he held the cross in his palm in such a way that it was illuminated by our little fire while he squinted at it closely. I realized then that he was looking at the words. "Can you read what it says?" He did not reply. Instead, he handed the cross back to me. The light is too weak, and I need my sleep." With that, he rolled onto his back and closed his eyes. I looked at him and at the cross, certain he'd found a meaning which he was not prepared to tell. Chapter 29. In the morning, Bear was much subdued. Now and again, as we prepared to go, I caught him glancing at me when he thought I would not notice. He said nothing, however, and I decided not to ask. I knew him well enough by then that he'd speak only when he chose. We set off over hills and through woods until at last we came upon a narrow, winding path. Here, Bear paused. "We'll go this way," he announced. "It will lead us somewhere." Sure enough, by mid-morning we heard the distant tolling of a bell. We stopped. There must be a village a league or so ahead. Bear cautioned. "Can you remember everything I told you about how we should enter such a place?" "I think so." "Try your tunes." I took out the recorder and played. He listened intently. "Good," he said. "You've learned well enough. We'll prosper as long as you do as I've taught you." Rare for him, he seemed nervous. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Crispin," he said solemnly, "if there is any trouble, ever, you're not to pay any mind to me. Just run." "Run?" I said, taken aback. "From what?" "If anyone should try to harm or apprehend you." Wait. Okay. "But where would I go?" He thought for a moment. "As far north as you can go." "Why there? You'll be safest out of the kingdom." "But aren't we going to Great Wexley?" "We are. On the 23rd of June, the eve of the feast of the St. John the Baptist." "Why then?" I asked. "It's Midsummer Day. The city will be crowded with a large market and festivals. There's always good for mummers. That's always good for mummers. We should do well. And as I told you, you have some matters with the man." "No, as I told you, I have some matters with the man." "What man?" He ruffled his beard. "It's a private matter." Then he added as if to mollify me. "I've promised to be there, and so I must." He was being evasive again, as when I'd asked him about the writing on my cross. "There's more, isn't there? Crispin, I'm part of a brotherhood. It's to make things better, to bring some change." "Nothing really changes," I said, thinking he had misspoken. He looked at me with a smile. "Have you not changed?" "A little," I admitted. "Crispin, I merely wish to bring some of that freedom you seek." He studied the sky as if some answer might be there. "But I fear the time isn't ready." "You expect some hazard, don't you?" Though I knew he heard my question, he acted as if he hadn't. "Is there some danger there for me?" I pressed him. "By St. Pancras," he said. "I was surprised when we saw that gathering waiting for you at the bridge." "That's for me." "That's for me. What about you?" He shrugged. "I never fear for myself." "Why?" "I make my own choices." "When do you fear for me there? Then do you fear for me there?" "Perhaps." "Why?" "Crispin, when it comes to the affairs of man, I only worry about what I cannot understand." "And?" I can't make sense of your innocence. In a ruthless world, I find innocence more of a puzzle than evil." "Must we go then? Must we go there then?" "Crispin, I told you, I promised this. Brotherhood, that in my travels I've surveyed the kingdom, that I would bring them the judgment of my observations. I try to keep my word. They're waiting for me." He picked up some dirt and rubbed it between his hands. "I must give them the benefit of my judgment. That's all." "You read the writing on my cross," I said. "What did it say?" He offered up a wry smile. Crispin, if we wish to survive, it's time for us to go to work. Bear, enough, he said with sudden authority and turned away. Chapter 30. It was not long before we approached the wooded outskirts of a little village. Its name was Lodge Cot, as we would later learn. When we came out from the trees, we saw cultivated fields. Men, women, and children were hard at work, just as at Stromford, plowing, weeding, and hoeing. The clothes they wore could have come right from my home, too. Here and there, sheep and cattle grazed. I found it a marvel that I could see so much of the world, yet find it much the same. As we passed the fields, people paused in their work to look at us. At first, Bear ignored them. Only when we drew closer to the village itself did he pause and scrutinize what lay ahead. I don't see any signs of trouble, he said. I looked around. What kind of trouble? I asked. The people looking at you. Now play. Though nervous, I put the pipe to my mouth and began to make music. Even as I did, Bear began to dance. So it was that we entered the village. If the village of Lodge Cot had been exchanged with Stromford, I don't think the world would have noticed. It contained the same cluster of small dwellings along a single rough road, with but one or two structures larger than the rest. Every house was roofed with thatch, with walls of wattle and daub. A stone church with a stubby tower stood close to the village center. On a low hill not far away, I spied a manor house. It was larger than the other houses, but not by very much. As we came into the village proper, dogs, pigs, and children approached us with a snuffling curiosity. They made sure to keep their distance. It was harder to say who was dirtier, the children or the beasts. Women emerged from cottages to stare at us guardedly, keeping their younger children behind their skirts. One of these women had a whispered exchange with a child, who promptly raced off toward the church. Remember what I've told you. Remember what I've been told. I, still playing music, headed straight for the church, too. Even as we approached it, a priest emerged, no doubt alerted by the child. He was a younger man than Father Quinnell, short, thin, with large round eyes, and the stubble of an ill-shaved beard. He did not appear very clean. His robes were quite soiled. Frowning, he stood before the church doors, hands clasped before him. I stepped aside and let Bear approach. He danced right up where the priest stood, and then, to my astonishment, halted and sank to his knees, pulling off his cap. I stopped playing and hoped my unease did not show. Most Reverend Father, Bear said in voice loud enough so all onlookers could hear, I, known as Bear, am a juggler. My son and I have made our way from the city of York, going toward Canterbury to perform sacred penance. We do humbly beseech your blessing. The priest visibly softened. My boy and I beg your gracious permission to perform some simple songs and dance for the greater glory of God, for this village, and for our grace, King Edward, England's warrior king, with whom I had the honor of fighting on the victorious fields of France. Then Bear bowed his head, but tilted it somewhat sideways, so as to keep an eye on me. I think he even winked. The priest looked at Bear, then at me, then at Bear again. Do you know sacred songs? I do, said Bear. Hands clapped together in prayer, he began to sing. Mary, maiden gracious and free, vessel of the Trinity, who graciously listens unto me as I greet thee with my song. Though my feet unclean be, and my hopes remain unborn, Thou art the queen of paradise, O heaven of earth and all that is. Thou gave birth to the king of bliss, without a sin or sore, putting to right all who are poor, winning life for us evermore. At the conclusion of his song, Bear bowed his head, crossed himself, and clasped his hands over his chest, the image of humility. The priest was clearly pleased. Smiling, he raised his hands over Bear's head and pronounced a blessing. At this, Bear jumped up and nodded to me. I took it to be a signal to resume my playing, which I did with gusto. It was not long before most of the townspeople had gathered around us in a great circle. Off to one side I played the music, while Bear performed in the center. Midway through the dance, he gathered up his leather balls and began to juggle. I could hear oohs and ahs from the crowd as Bear added first a third ball, then a fourth. Then, when he stepped forward and snatched a mazer from the hands of one of the onlookers and added it to the revolving mix, there was laughter and applause. The young man from whom he'd taken the mazer was a small, one-eyed youth. He wore a patch over his other eye. He also had a thin, scraggly beard that seemed designed to proclaim him older than he was. Though others roared at Bear's antics, this young man took offense at Bear's gambols, and with growing anger made 3 attempts to snatch his mazer back. Each time, Bear, with great dexterity, seemed to offer him the mazer, but at the last moment tossed it high. This was done to great hilarity of the crowd, but to the increasing resentment of the young man. Finally, muttering curses under his breath, the young man stormed away. No one seemed to care. Attentive to what I'd been taught, I approached Bear. Still dancing and juggling, he inclined his head to allow me to remove his cap. I took it. Holding it before me, I moved about, saying nothing, but begging for coins. To my great delight, we received a few pennies, as well as some bread. When Bear was finally done and stood all in a sweat, people gathered around him, even as children surrounded me and pelted me with questions. What's your name? Where are you from? Where are you going? How'd you learn such things? Is your father the biggest man in the world? Were among the questions I was asked. Oh, I started to respond honestly, but caught myself and gave another name, another place. As for Bear, remembering what he had said, I claimed him for my father. At length, Bear called me to his side. Led by the priest, who was nothing but smiles now, we entered the church. Many from the village followed us inside. One of them, I noticed, was the one-eyed young man who had returned. He gazed at Bear with such malevolence, I thought he might offer harm. The church was like my own at Stromford, though very different imagery on the walls. In particular, there was a vision of Jesus harrowing hell, the demons frightened to behold. Before the altar, both Bear and I knelt, and I at least prayed. "And where will you be going next?" the priest asked afterwards. The onlookers seemed as interested in our answers as was the priest. "To Great Wexley, for the fair on the feast of John the Baptist," Bear returned, "but always toward Canterbury," he added. "There are many villages hereabout," the priest informed us, "but you need to be on the alert for a notorious murderer." I had been gazing at the images on the wall. Now I turned to listen. "What do you mean?" Bear said to the priest. "At a village north of here, I'm not sure which, a boy went mad. After robbing the manor house, he killed a priest." I hastily looked down, lest I gave myself away, but as I shifted, I became aware that the one-eyed young man was staring right at me. "God mend all!" Bear cried with horror, making the sign of the cross. "Can't they find him?" "No one knows where he's fled," the priest said, "but an official came here, along with the troop, of armed men. They say the youth is very dangerous. He's been declared a wolf's head. There's 20 shillings reward for his taking, dead or alive." "I'm grateful you warned me," Bear said, stony-faced. "We would love to earn that money. Who is your lord, sir? Who is your lord here?" "Lord Furnival," the priest replied. "And though I've been gone for these 14 years, we've received word that give thanks to God, though gravely ill, he's at the last returned to England. We pray daily that he may recover and that we may see him soon." "God is kind to those who love him," Bear said. "How did you learn this news?" "He sent a courier, a man named Dubray." With many gracious words, Bear took leave of the priest. Then he mingled with the townspeople and asked them many questions about their crops, their harvests, the life they led. And though I wished desperately to speak to him, I kept away. Chapter 31. That afternoon when we left the town, Bear told me to play. So it was that we departed the village as we entered, I playing music while Bear danced. This time we were followed by a host of gleeful children. Gradually the children abandoned us. It was only when we were entirely alone that Bear ended his dancing. Then I stopped my playing too. "Did you hear?" I blurted out right away. "They're accusing me of murdering Father Quinnell." "I heard." "That priest also said Lord Furnival was their master. How can that be?" "These lords of the realm own more land than God himself. Now we need to hurry." But when the priest named the courier that had come to them, I recognized the name. "Did you?" "It was the man my village steward, John Aycliffe, met in the woods." Okay, let me start that over. I'm trying to figure out who says what. "These lords of the realm own more land than God himself. Now we need to hurry." But when the priest named the courier that had come to him, I recognized the name. "Did you?" "It was the man my village's steward, John Aycliffe, met in the woods. Father Quinnell spoke his name. And that young one-eyed man you teased, the one who grew angry, I've been trying to notice things. He was paying close attention to me." Bear shrugged. "We're strangers, for some strangers are threats, and they look at us accordingly. Pay it no mind." "But you told them we were going to Great Wexley." "A lip. A small slip." "Bear." "What?" "You also called me your son." "Ah, Crispin, you could do worse, far worse." Usually such remark came with a laugh, but this time he was very serious. How did I do?" I said. "Very well." My heart swelled. "Shouldn't we be worried?" "Crispin, there's an old soldier's saying, if you have to choose between alertness and worry, being alert will bring you more days of life. Now, even more important, let us see what we earned." I had completely forgotten about that. Kneeling on the ground, Bear emptied his sack. We had earned 4 silver pennies, 4 farthings, and 6 loaves of bread. "That's so much," I said. "I'm not so impressed," he said. "But consider, Crispin, it belongs to no one else but ourselves. Honest pay for honest work, and you deserve some too." He offered me a whole penny. That's pretty cool.
A what?
"But I'm your servant," I said. "Ah, but you have earned it," he said, folding my fingers over the corn. "And we're free men." I looked at the corn as it lay in my palm. "Are you sure?" "Did you work hard?" "I tried." "Then you deserve it, Crispin. Now come, we need to earn some more." I looked at the coin as it lay in my palm. "Are you sure?" "Did you work hard?" I tried. Then you deserve it. Now come, we need to earn some more. I said that again, I'm sorry. We started off again, my thoughts enraptured by the notion that we were indeed free. Then, when I reminded myself that I was still a wolf's head and pursued, the luster of the moment dimmed. Chapter 32. Over the next 20 days, we sometimes followed roads, sometimes only paths. Now and again, we made our way through open fields and woods. Bear did not wish to go in any straightforward way. During that time, we performed in many villages. Each performance was much like the first, though Bear said I grew better, even suggesting I might have skills. He continued to teach me more melodies, and once I juggled while he played. What's more, our pennies mounted. Never had I felt so free. Never had I felt such constant joy. Then one evening, Bear said, "Crispin, what do you know of arms?" His question startled me. What do you mean? Weapons, the sword, the dagger, the bow. Nothing? It's time you learned. But why? I said. Since you are still a wolf's head, you might as well have some fangs. It could prove necessary. It was hard to know what upset me more, the weapons, the handling of it, the idea that I might need it, or that I was in such danger that I'd have no choice but to use it. But I did practice. At another time, when we were before our evening fire, he set about using needle and thread to mend the holes in his leggings. When he'd done, I asked if I could do as much, and would he teach me how. This he did, with much laughter on his part and frustration on mine. Once I asked him how he learned to speak so boldly, not merely to strangers, but even to those above his station. It's all in the eyes, he said. What do you mean? In faith, Crispin, you have a servile look. When you first come upon me, you kept your eyes upon the ground, as if that's where they belonged. Where should I look? I've heard it said that a man's soul may be observed behind his eyes. Is that true? Perhaps. All I know is that when I look upon a man, if he refuses to look at me, I can't see his soul. I'll consider him without and act accordingly. Therefore, you need to let people see what lies within you. I don't know if I can. You doubted yourself could make music too. Then from now, when I speak to you, I said, call eyes. Call eyes if I look away or down. He laughed loudly. I promise. And so he did. Then there was the day when I asked him to teach me how to make the snares he used to catch rabbits and birds. Do I not catch enough? He asked. The only reason you caught me in that abandoned village, I said, was because I had no food. What if I'm alone again? He looked at me curiously. You're right, he said, and with a rueful smile, and commenced to teaching me that as well. At 2 places where we performed, we learned more of the search of me. Though we discovered nothing new, it meant that we were still looking. One night, it meant that they were still looking. One night, just before he lay back to sleep, Bear said, Crispin, tomorrow we'll enter Great Wexley. What will happen there? I said. Only God in his heaven knows, he replied. But, he added, if you pray tonight, Crispin, pray that the devil does not know first. That put me in mind of the images of the demons in the church at Lodge Cot. Bear, I asked, what do you think the devil looks like? I suppose the devil has many faces, as there are sins. At the moment, however, I think of him as Lord Furnival. Why him? So much of the land we've passed through, and the misery, belongs to him. He treats his people badly. Bear, you won't betray me, will you? He gave me an angry look. How can you even ask? Forgive me, I said, but it has happened. And do you think I will? I don't want to. Frowning, he considered me for a while. Crispin, he said, you must know I care for you. Perhaps you remind me of what I once was. And as the devil knows all too well, liking goes many leagues with me. True, you're as ignorant as a turnip, or perhaps a cabbage. But you've got a heart of oak, small acorn though you are. What say you to become my apprentice? I'll teach you as much as I know, the juggling, singing, and dancing, the music making. I'll be your teacher, not your master. What you care for that? Would you care for that? Very much, I said, barely able to speak. He extended his great hand to me. I grasped it. Then it is done, he said. You are henceforward, my true apprentice. Then we lay down and went to sleep. Then he lay down and went to sleep. I could not. Though I was excited by Bear's promise, I was very nervous. Should I or should I not trust him? I fumbled for my cross and was about to pray for guidance, but found myself pausing. I had already asked God for much, and he'd given in abundance. Perhaps it was time for me to make the decision for myself. With that thought, I put my cross away and took a deep breath. I would trust Bear. The decision would be mine and mine alone. But I would stay alert for all that might yet come. That decision made, I lay down and stared at the stars until I fell asleep. The end of these chapters.